Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Elizabeth Worthington, and I'm a Cadet Under Officer from 701 Squadron Australian Air Force Cadets. It's my honour to be your MC tonight. Thank you for attending the 44th Battalion Memorial Service. This will be the 14th and final hour of the service. I would like to start by recognising the special guests and support we have present for this ceremony. The Mayor of Wanneroo, Linda Atkin, Iona Presentation College, 701 Australian Air Force Cadets, Bugler Robert McCormack from the West Australia Fire and Emergency Services Band, Scotch College Pipe Band, and Churchland's Senior High School Bugler Spencer Brown. I now ask everyone to please stand for the mounting of the catapult party. Thank you. Please be seated. I now call on the Director of the 44th Australian Infantry Battalion Memorial, Mr. Luke Anderson, to explain the ceremony.
Hello, my name is Luke Anderson. I'm the founder and director of the 44th Australian Infantry Battalion Memorial and the great-grandson of John McKean, who served in that unit. I'm also a trooper in the Australian Army Reserves. I created the 44th Battalion Memorial in March of this year because I saw a real lack of recognition for this particular unit. It was one of 5 battalions raised in Western Australia during the Great War. However, it is the only one to no longer exist, having been disbanded in 1960. As such, it has started to become forgotten over the years. They do not have their own physical cenotaph, and until now they did not have their banner marched on Anzac Day. The stories of the thousands of men who served with the battalion and the 482 who gave the supreme sacrifice in the defence of our country are at real risk of fading away. This is the first memorial service dedicated solely to the 44th Battalion in many years, as the old association ceased to exist long ago. There will be and have been 15 ceremonies today, going from dawn until dusk, each one representing a different battle and having different songs, poems and stories. The names of all the soldiers on the 44th Battalion Honour Roll have been read out throughout the day. There has been an honour guard, band and speakers present throughout the day, and the main ceremony took place at 11 a.m, where His Excellency the Governor of Western Australia, Chris Dawson AC APM, reviewed the memorial. Our memorial aims to keep the individual stories of the soldiers alive. We do this through our interactive website, which details how many days a specific soldier was at the front line, what awards they earned, what battles they fought in, when they were sick, what they did before the war, who their family were, and etc. This is quite a demanding project, as even if we complete one soldier a day, it will take over 6 years to complete. Luckily, many members of the community donate their time to complete the biographies of these soldiers. The memorial also conducts ceremonies for individual soldiers, the goal being to individually commemorate every soldier in the battalion. We have done 12 of those smaller ceremonies in the suburbs of Perth, the towns of the Wheatbelt, and with the Swedish Embassy in Canberra, commemorating nearly 70 soldiers so far. We also had Christchurch Grammar School create a faithful copy of the 44th Battalion banner, which was signed by the Mayor of Claremont, mimicking the raising ceremony of the 44th Battalion in 1916, 108 years ago. This banner was then marched through St George's Terrace on Anzac Day this year. I thank you all for attending and hope that you find this a meaningful service.
Thank you. I will now read out the story of the 44th Battalion Australian Imperial Force. Raised in Claremont in January 1916, it was the last battalion to be raised in Western Australia during the war. It originally left Western Australia with 1,000 men under the command of Lieutenant Colonel Mansbridge on the 6th of June 1916 and arrived in England the following month to continue their training. They named themselves Old Bill's Thousand. Another 1,500 men would join the 44th Battalion as reinforcements over the following 18 months. The 44th Battalion arrived in France in late November 1916 and the following month was sent to the front lines of the Armentries sector. Over a period of 3 months, the battalion suffered nearly 70 killed from constant attritional warfare. From May to August 1917, the 44th Battalion fought brutal engagements at Mezzanine and suffered nearly 130 killed in the deadliest overall engagement for the unit. Lieutenant Colonel James Clark took over the command of the unit after the battle would end and remained in command until the end of the war. The deadliest month of their entire service came in October 1917, shortly after the Battle of Mezzanine, where they were committed to the hellish fighting at Passagende and Brudenside. In the span of less than 3 weeks, the battalion suffered over 90 killed and 750 wounded or sick, a casualty rate of 84%. After months of recovering, the 44th Battalion was desperately committed to slowing down the advance of the German Spring Offensive from March to May 1918, suffering nearly 60 deaths, but successfully halting the enemy advance in one of the most chaotic operations of the war, often not knowing where the front line was. On the 4th of July 1918, the West Australians fought alongside the Americans in one of their first engagements, the Battle of Hamel, suffering 30 deaths in a single day. The month of August 1918 saw the battalion fight and win in 2 decisive battles, the Battle of Amiens and the Second Battle of the Somme. From this point onwards, the Imperial German Army was in constant retreat until the end of the war 100 days later. The battalion suffered only 25 deaths during these battles, but seized vast amounts of territory and took many prisoners. The final operation of the war for the 44th Battalion was to cross the St. Quentin Canal and take Mount St. Quentin and breach heavily defended the Hindenburg Line. This occurred on the 29th of September 1918. All of the 44th Battalion's objectives were seized on the first day, at the cost of 30 deaths. For the remainder of the war, the 44th Battalion was down just a company's strength as reinforcements had ceased arriving for half a year. Only 80 of the men were capable of fighting. As such, it conducted rear duties until the armistice. During the war, the 44th Battalion fought in nearly 24 engagements and received 16 battle honours. 2,642 men had served with the battalion, of whom 1,793 had become casualties, with 482 paying the supreme sacrifice. This represents a casualty rate of 68% and a death rate of 18%. For their service, members of the battalion received 125 rewards for gallantry in action, 19 awards for leadership in action, 5 awards for other acts of service, 11 foreign awards from the United States, Belgium, and France, and 1 man was anointed into an Order of Chivalry. After the war, the 44th Battalion was reformed as a Citizens Military Forces unit consisting of 3 companies in Perth and 1 company in Bunbury. In the 1920s, it received King's Colours, regimental colours, a cat badge depicting a grass tree, a motto, an alliance with the Essex Regiment, and their regimental name became the West Australian Rifles. This unit continued to serve until 1960, being on the home defence duties during the Second World War. Its lineage continues today as the Royal West Australian Regiment. I now call on Iona Presentation College to read out some short stories regarding the battalion. These are why the unit was nicknamed Execook and how the Australians were treated by the British and French civilians. nickname Eggs Are Cooked was bestowed upon the 3rd Australian Division, of which the 44th Battalion was a part. It was given by the members of the other Australian divisions when the 3rd first arrived in England for training. The term originated in Egypt, where the locals sold hard-boiled eggs to the troop and shouted their wares as "Eggs are cooked." It was applicable to the 3rd Division by reason of the fact that their colour patches were oval-shaped. It implied that while the 3rd Division was training in England, the other 4 Australian divisions were fighting in the strenuous battles of the Somme. The nickname generally provoked retaliation, and fistic arguments were not uncommon. Once in France, however, the derision attached to the term commenced to die, and after the Battle of Messines, where the 3rd Division acquitted itself favourably, the term "eggs are cooked" lost altogether its suggestions of inferiority. Towards the closing stages of the war in 1918, the division was extraordinarily proud of its nickname. The wonderful part the civilians of the British Isles played in the Great War will never be forgotten by the diggers. Every digger in England on convalescence was given the opportunity of being a guest in some English home, where the best was not good enough for him, and his host went to no end of trouble and expense to make his stay an enjoyable one. Of course, the digger with his unconventional ways soon made himself at home, and made the task of catering for his amusement an easy one. The digger in hospital was made a special charge by the English women, and on visiting days they thronged through the wards, giving words of cheer to lonely diggers and always leaving packs of cigarettes or some other welcome luxury. The general feeling too in England was a marvellous one, considering that most of the manhood of the nation was engaged overseas, and the daily casualties from all the fronts of their own folk were tremendous. Yet the optimism and cheerfulness which met the war-weary digger in England on leave, after a moral-racking stunt, made a new man of him, and caused him to return to his unit inspired. There is no doubt whatever that the impression gained by the actual contact was that the national morale of the French people was something for visitors to wonder at. When the Aussie veterans looked back and remembered the little French farmhouse, with its cherry madame and perhaps one or two mademoiselles, its wonderful stove, the simple kitchen and its spotless brick floor, but they will perhaps marvel now at the means whereby steak and eggs, coffee and bread were always forthcoming so readily and in such generous quantities. Madame never seemed the less put out, even when her kitchen was uncomfortably crowded with hungry diggers. And the day when the boys left for the line, with Madame and the girls staring at the door waving handkerchiefs, with tears streaming down their faces, they knew only too well that they were seeing many a bon Australian for the last time. In the villages just behind the line, the women of France endured many of the dangers of the men. Shell fire and gas took a heavy toll of casualties, and the conditions under which they stuck to the ruins of their home had to be seen to be properly appreciated. Even the little children attended school with tiny gas masks hanging over their shoulders. Their sleeping masks were in cellars. Their amusements were nil. Yet under almost trench conditions, they showed smiling faces and a cheery word always for their beloved Australians.
Thank you. Throughout the day, the names of the 482 soldiers of the 44th Battalion who paid the supreme sacrifice will be read out. In this particular hour, 4 speakers will each read out 7 of the names. I now call the Mayor of Wanneroo, Iona Presentation College and the Memorial Director to come and assist me with reading out the honour roll.
Private Rupert Walton, farmer from York, died of wounds at Hemel, 4th of July 1918, aged 20. Corporal George Oscar Harden Walmsley, station manager from Geraldton, killed in action at Hemel, 4th of July 1918, age 35. Lance Corporal Charles Alexander Wan, labourer from Bullsbrook, killed in action breaching the Hindenburg Line, 30th of September 1918, age 26. Private Lewis Stanley Warren, General Store Manager from Tambela, killed in action at Passchendaele on the 14th of October 1917, age 28. Private Peter Patrick Waters, labourer from Darwin, killed in action in the Big Raid 14th of March 1917, age 31. Private John Horace Waters, labourer from Subiaco, killed in action at Messines, 10th of June 1917, age 25. Private John Hay Weir, printer from Cottesloe, killed in action at Warnton, 1st of August 1917, age 19.
Private Alfred James Welshman, apprentice moulder from North Fremantle, killed in action at Messines, 8th of June 1917, aged 20. Driver Charles Edwin Wenstrom, labourer from Victoria, died of wounds 20th of June 1919, aged 30. Private George West, clerk from Brownhill, killed in action at Warnton, 1st of August 1917, aged 22. Private Charles Montague White, shell opener from Broome, died of wounds at Messines, 7th of June 1917, aged 37. Private George Stephen White, labourer from Northampton, killed in action at Messines, 5th of July 1917, aged 20. Private Harold Edwin White, locomotive driver from Perth, killed in action at Almentres, 2nd of January 1917, aged 22. Private Norman Richard White, clerk from Geraldton, killed in action at Broomseen Ridge, 4th of October 1917, aged 20.
Private Edward Burnell Wilkins, a bricklayer from Perth, killed in action at Messines on the 8th of June 1917, aged 27. Private Leslie George Wilkinson, clerk from Perth, killed in action at Messines on 10th of June 1917, aged 21. Private Albert Edward Williams, farmer for Katanning, killed in action at Brudenside Ridge, 4th of October 1917, aged 27. Private Charlie Williamson, a miner from Belmont, died of illness at the Western Front on the 10th of December 1916, aged 26. Corporal William James Wilson, a pipe welder from Subiaco, killed in action at Moran Court on the 31st of May 1918, aged 28. Private Herbert William Wise, a labourer from Dumbleyung, killed in action at Hamel on the 4th of July 1918, aged 24. Private Charles Edward Whittle, millhand from Boulder, killed in action at Warnington on the 31st of July 1917, aged 31.
Cheers. Private Robert Garner Wood, hairdresser from East Perth, killed in action at Broodside Ridge, 4th of October 1917, age 31. Private William Frederick Wood, labourer from Perth, killed in action at Messines, 11th of June 1917, age 37. Private James Woolley, woodchopper from Perth, killed in action at Armentières, 16th of February 1917, age 39. Private George William Worley, miner from Boulder, killed in action at Broodside Ridge, 5th of October 1917, age 23. Private Arthur Wright, labourer from Osborne Park, died of wounds in Perth, 8th of September 1919, age 24. Captain John Young, career soldier from Perth, killed in action at Passchendaele, 10th of October 1917, age 35.
They were Australian soldiers who were experts in close combat. They were physically and mentally tough, compassionate and courageous. They led by example. They strove to take the initiative. They were committed to learning and working for their team. They believed in trust, loyalty and respect for their country, their mates and the army. The rising sun was their badge of honour, and they are Australian soldiers always. Thank you to all of those who helped reading out the honour roll. I now call on Iona Presentation College to read out the story of the return to Australia.
The breaching of the Hindenburg Line was a fitting climax to the fighting career of the battalion. They had been in action for nearly 2 years and lost roughly 480 men killed and at least 1,350 wounded. They had never lost a trench. On only one occasion, they had failed to do exactly what they set out to do. They had captured hundreds of German prisoners, yet in the whole of 2 years had only lost 8 prisoners to the enemy. On the 5th of October 1918, the battalion was moved back to a village near Amiens. They were now among civilians for the first time since March, after 6 months in war-shattered areas, which had created a longing for civilian companionship. The battalion was a shell of its former self, with only 80 men fit for combat, compared to the required strength of 1,000. At the village, they rested for the next month, rebuilding their strength until news came on the 11th of November 1918 that war was over. Looking back at the part played by all units of the Australian Corps on the Somme from August to October, a period of 60 days, it is safe to say that rarely has a more strenuous or successful campaign been fought in history. In spite of anything written to the contrary, the Germans were brave and skillful fighters, and there was never a mistake made by his opponents, and he did not take full military advantage of. Although at the time it seemed that too much was being asked of the troops, the results proved that the Corps commander, Lieutenant General John Monash's judgment was correct, and it was better to keep Thai troops pushing to the extent of the last ounce of their physical powers than to allow a equally tied enemy the opportunity of reorganising his forces and defences. During the waiting period prior to embarkation for Australia, time was passed by educational and sporting stunts. Leave was freely given, and opportunities were made for all ranks to receive civilian employment in England. Even so, time hung heavily. Gradually, the units were reduced, and finally, in the early part of 1919, the 44th Battalion AIF ceased to exist. Some men continued to serve in the military post-war and remained in Europe until 1920. Some men decided to move to England and start a new life there. But the vast majority returned to Western Australia and back to their old homes. Many of them brought with them new families that they have been married in England, but many more came back shattered. During the Great War, more than 330,000 Australians served overseas. 216,000 of them became casualties, and 60,000 of them paid the ultimate sacrifice in their service in the nation. Their legacy and unique spirit of audacity and mateship and endurance continue today as a part of the Anzac legend, one of the core identities of Australia itself. Our freedom was not free. We are forever in debt, lest we forget.
Thank you. The piper will now play a piece. Thank you. I now invite Iona Presentation College to read out their poem, Welcome to Returned Soldiers. This was written by a farmer from the Wheatbelt region for returning wounded soldiers.
Welcome, welcome, welcome to the boys that are brave and true, who lay down their lives for Australia. Our heartfelt thanks to you. You fought in the trenches for freedom, for the honour of Australia as well. No deeds of honour could be greater than those that fought there and fell. We pray for those who are sleeping in a honoured soldier's grave, who died for the love of their country and fought so fearless and brave. And we welcome you back to Australia. It is our duty, our honour to do. For you have done your bit for Australia, and Australia is now proud of you.
Thank you. We will now lay the wreaths at the base of the memorial. Wreaths will be laid by the Mayor of Wanneroo, Iona Presentation College, 701 Squadron, and the Memorial Director. Upon the conclusion of the laying of the wreaths, I invite anyone in the audience to also lay a wreath if they have one. The pipers will now begin the lament. I now ask that everyone please stand for the reciting of the ode, and remain standing for the last post, the 1 minute silence, the rouse, the Australian Royal Anthem, and the Australian National Anthem. They shall not grow old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them, lest we forget. Thank you all. Please remain standing for the dismounting of the catafalque party. Thank you. Please be seated. I now invite the Memorial Director to give the closing address. I also ask for everyone to take part in a formal photo in front of the memorial at the conclusion of this ceremony.
Well, that is the close of the ceremony. It's been going since 4 a.m. this morning. Thank you all for attending. To end this ceremony, I leave you with a quote by Captain Longmore regarding the 44th Battalion. While memory lives, however, the fighting 44th will never die. To be with them over there was a privilege and an honour, a glorious page in any man's life. And when the final evening comes to us all and the last pipe has been smoked, it will be of the comrades who wore the blue and white oval patch that will be proudly thinking, theirs was a tradition that Australia will do well to perpetuate, whilst there's a growing generation of free men and free women left to be inspired by it. And ladies and gentlemen, we are those free men and women. Please now join me in the photo at the memorial.